Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today and allowing me to give you this summary of the research I'm doing or about to do. My name's Sarah Alcock and I'm the first year PhD student. So I'm going to spend 10 to 15 minutes just giving you a quick tour of my research and my plans, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So my research is titled Data-Driven Reflection in Professional Learning, Using Learning Analytics Dashboards in Learning Design to Engage Final Year Student Chartered Accountants and their tutors in Assessment Learning Analytics. So it's a bit of a mouthful at the moment. It's also incredibly specific. So let me start with how I got here. I worked for the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, ICAW, in their Learning and Professional Development Department for just over 10 years. ICAW is the premier membership body for chartered accountants, certainly in the UK, and they would say globally as well. My role changed a few times as I progressed through, but I was always linked to the operations side of exam setting and exam results delivery. And I was particularly involved in the setting and marking of the case study exam, which is the final exam before membership. And then in 2010, I left with the senior examiner of that exam, and we set up Training by EOS, which is or was a tuition firm specialising in tutoring for that case study exam. So we created and delivered our own courses online and in classrooms. And we also partnered with a variety of other commercial tutor firms who delivered the case study as a part of a suite of exams. And one of those that we partnered with was called First Intuition. And they used our mock exam material. So we wrote mock exams as part of preparation courses. So during our 11 years of teaching, one of the biggest questions we heard from students was the obvious one: why did I fail? And the case study exam is a master's level exam. It's level 7 in the apprenticeship scheme, if you're familiar with that. And it aims to bring together all the knowledge students should have gained over the previous 14 exams that they'd already sat, and their work experience. So it's a difficult exam. It's meant to be difficult. It is difficult. And it's got a complicated marking system. It does have a relatively high pass rate, which is 75%. And that's certainly high compared to other accountancy awarding bodies. But it still means, even 75%, which sounds good, means that 1 in 4 students are failing the exam rather than qualifying as a chartered accountant. So at EOS in particular, our students were usually research students. So we put a lot of work into helping them understand the exam requirements and what they personally needed to do based on those to improve. So we were using the data generated by their mock exams. Then in 2018, the exams moved online, and suddenly we had a lot more data to work with, and we could use that to help students find the answer to that question: why did I fail? And that's when I started my MA in online and distance education with the OU. I discovered this wonderful world of learning analytics research. Training by EOS actually closed in 2021 due to the retirement of my business partner, but First Intuition are keen to continue the mock exam dashboard development and agreed to allow me to conduct my research in their tuition centres. So back to the research side. I've just passed my upgrade, so I've completed an initial literature review, and given my background, I've kept my focus on learning analytics dashboards. So dashboards in the literature are often designed to summarise past online learning data as an aid to future learning. So using visualisations to help summarise the data and present it in an accessible way. And there are no real rules about what that visualization should be, but there are a lot of examples out there, and context is the most important thing. The dashboard needs to answer any relevant questions that a stakeholder has. So here's an example from Kim et al. And the user can see how many times they've logged into a learning system, how long they were in there, and also how their behaviour compares to other students and how it compares to the average. So the blue dots there are other students and the red dot is the student using the system. And that's all fine, and it's very interesting if you're a data nerd like I am, but it shows the users where they are, but it does tend to leave a bit of a so what question in the air. And that links to some of the key debates I found in my literature review. So the first is user agency versus data literacy, with the user being either a teacher or a learner in this case. So there's some very clever dashboards that allow users to define their own data sets within the learning system and create a variety of visualizations. And that gives the users choice, but it also puts a burden on them because they need to be confident. They need to be confident in exploring data to use that tool. So some people say, well, then data literacy is important. We need to teach people how to do that. But that's an additional task, and not every user is wants to learn that or is interested in it or indeed has the time for it. So that leads us to the notion of exploratory versus explanatory dashboards. So rather than giving the user the task of exploring the data and creating meaning from the data, an explanatory dashboard tells the story of the data, and it's human-centered, it's not data-centered. The meaning it supports understanding and meaning making. So Echeverria et al. Use the term educational data storytelling, which I love. And one of their examples shows how a more standard chart exploring module visits in this case can be expanded with story data telling elements. So it's got a descriptive title, it's got a design that highlights the relevant data and reduces the impact of the less relevant information, and it's got some context added as well. So an explanatory dashboard can be linked to this idea of action-based dashboard, which is a dashboard that helps the user as well by suggesting next steps. Finally, my literature review highlighted calls for learning analytics research to be consistently grounded in learning theory, which makes sense. Learning analytics research is relatively new. So using sort of decades of learning research before technology enhanced learning seems like a very sensible approach. So my research uses self-regulated learning as the core framework, and I'll show you why I chose that theory as I talk a bit more about the context. So in all, I identified 4 research gaps. The first is that actually most research to date has been in schools or universities, just because that's where researchers exist and that's where they feel that they can contribute. But private and commercial education is expanding rapidly. So my research is going to take place in a professional learning context. Student chartered accountants preparing for the last exam of their professional qualification, so first intuition. How this demographic of learners understand and use the dashboards will be addressed in research question 1. The second gap is the lack of research into this new type of dashboard that's explanatory and action-based. And the third gap is a lack of research into an extremely new area of automated written feedback, which is an element or part of the data storytelling. It was said to be impossible 6 years ago. A paper I read said this can never happen. But actually in 2022, it's a mainstream research topic. And the dashboard in my research gives explanatory and action-based feedback on mock exam results, along with automated written feedback, which is generated based on the electronic marking. So both of those gaps will be addressed by research question 2. The final gap is the lack of grounding in learning theory, as I just spoke about. So we'll be using self-regulated learning as a framework in research question 3. And because these students sit multiple mock exams as part of their learning, with dashboard feedback for each one, the study pattern fits really nicely with the self-regulation cycle. So overall, my research aim is to evaluate the use of student-focused assessment dashboard in a professional learning context. The exam is a case study exam. It's 4 hours long, and it requires the learner to combine knowledge of pre-seen exhibits. So there's an advanced information document, which is issued 6 weeks before the exam. And then on the day they get new information, new exhibits, something has happened within this company and they have to combine the knowledge that they've got for the whole of their qualification into this advanced information, and then deliver an exam on the day, new on the day information. And their job is to write a professional report. There are about 5,500 entrants annually across the globe, and most of those are in the UK. And First Intuition expect to have just over 10% on their courses in 2023, which is when I'll do my main data collection. Oh, that way. So the case study students sit at least 2 mock exams as part of their preparation course, and the mock exam dashboard presents visualized data with personalized and action-based feedback. And I'll just show you why. So you may or may not be able to read this, depending how big your screen is. You don't need to read it, but it's the marking key for requirement 1 of the exam. And there are 4 requirements, so there's 3 more pages that look like this. And as I said, it's got some complicated marking rules, the most basic of which is that to pass the exam, you have to get 50% competent grades in each requirement. So you can see it's an incredibly busy document with a whole lot of data for the student to reflect on when they receive their mock exam marking. But the pattern of the competencies, those 4 columns that you can see and that they're arranged into, is always the same. So we can use that in our dashboard. So this is part of it. The visualization in the middle is a map of the marking key, so those 4 columns and the boxes within them. And it means the students can quickly see where they've passed, which are the shaded green boxes, where they failed, the boxes outlined in red, and the grey text competencies are the ones that are considered absolutely the hardest to achieve. So the students are advised to get the core boxes, and that's the ones that they get the feedback on. That's the most important ones for passing. So at the top, you can see this is your result. This is the student's result. There's a reminder of the objective, and then underneath you get some feedbacks. And the feedback are things to do to pass the boxes outlined in red. So everything you see here comes from a template feedback, and there's a basic template. When a mock exam is written, the tutors update it to make it specific to that exam. And then all of First Intuition's students who sit a mock exam can get personalized feedback in this format. So back to the research proposal. As I said, students do at least 2 marked mock exams, and the expectation is that they reflect on that mock exam performance and use that to plan improvements before sitting the next one. And that fits really neatly into the cycle of self-regulated learning. They sit the exam, reflect on their performance with the help of the dashboard, with a marking key, with sample answers and classroom or online discussions, and then they use that information to plan achievable improvements. So the study is going to use mixed methods to get the empirical data about actual exam results, mock exam results, and the real ones, and how the students use the dashboard. And that will be a quantitative questionnaire along with a qualitative sections as well, to get the richness of the student experience, so through free text survey questions. I'm also going to the classroom sessions, so I'll be able to observe what's happening in the classes, and the plan is to conduct post-exams interviews to get a more qualitative, as I said, richer understanding of the student experience. I have completed the first phase of the pilot study. So I've recruited participants and carried out the initial survey. And that was done during, it was in April, the first 2 days of their course. There where that purple arrow is, on the 5th floor of First Intuition in Reading. And as you can see from my tweet, I was quite excited to have my first data set. And it was great because the students were really welcoming and they were interested in the project. So phase 2 of the pilot data collection starts on the 1st of July, that's next week. And the full data collection will be from April to November in 2023. And just to give you a very early taste of some survey results, one of the questions I asked was how easy that map was of the marking key, how easy it was to understand. Remember, the map is the simplified diagram of the marking key. And at this point, the students were at the very beginning of their journey, so they hadn't done any mock exams and they'd only just learned about this terribly complicated marking key. So it was all quite theoretical. But despite this, 7 of my 10 pilot participants said the map was very easy or easy to understand. And only 1 participant said that it was very difficult. So that's an encouraging start, at least, that the majority find the visualization easy to use. And it's going to be really interesting to see how those results might change once the students are using the dashboard for their own data, rather than hypothetical questions. So just in summary, dashboard research is complex and certainly far from complete. I've identified 4 research gaps to focus on, and I've got access to this unique professional learning setting to do this. I'm using mixed methods, research to gain knowledge on the effectiveness of a learning dashboard. And that's relevant not only to ISOW case study students, but can then contribute to the wider context of professional tutors and learners. Those are my references. Thank you very much for listening. I'd be really pleased to take any questions or hear any feedback that you might got. Thank you.